Thanks everyone for tuning in to IGDA Winnipeg's first interactive business roundtable. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on Treaty 1 territory and that the land from which we're broadcasting is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Denen people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Corey, I'm co-chair of IGDA Winnipeg, and I'll be your host for the night. IGDA Winnipeg is the local chapter of the International Game Developers Association. It's the largest member-based nonprofit organization, and it's here to serve all individuals who are in the game industry. For us specifically in Manitoba, it's all about creating awareness and making this the best community possible. And I hope that this event particularly highlights that we already have a good community, but we want to get people's voices out there, share knowledge, and hopefully make other people interested in what we do. Now, before I get into the specifics of tonight's event, we do have an upcoming event that I'd like to quickly announce. So on December 9th, we'll be streaming a very special edition of our Developers Let's Play series, this one featuring Canadian indie developer Noel Barry, a co-creator of the hit indie darling Celeste, among a whole bunch of amazing titles. We are super fortunate. This is something that Dan Voth, the other co-chair, has been putting together behind the scenes. More details about this event will be coming soon, pretty much like tomorrow. We'll start posting about it. If you want to stay up to date and know all the things we're up to, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, subscribe on Twitch, which is where you're watching now, or YouTube, where you might be watching in the future. And you'll be able to keep up with events like this. But this is one of the first events we're doing with somebody who is outside the community and outside the Winnipeg community specifically, and we're really excited about it. So about this event specifically, tonight we're bringing together many of Winnipeg's most successful interactive business owners in a panel format. They'll be asked questions and hopefully provide valuable insights into how they run their business. Everything from different sales models and revenue strategies to how they went about raising funds. All of this might be explored. I can't guarantee anything because I don't know what's going to happen exactly on the panel, but that's the plan. We may even discuss things like independent distribution versus working with a publisher. Nothing is off the table, and everything is meant to help existing businesses or people interested in working in the game industry to have a little bit more knowledge and information to make it easier, basically, to work in what is a very competitive environment. So here is a picture of our entire panel. Each of them owned and operates a Winnipeg-based business and has done so for many years. Some of them have even been in business for over a decade, which is Noah, who basically pioneered the existence of the industry here. And he was gracious enough to share many of his years of wisdom with us tonight. And I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I know he's always been very available to help people trying to get started. Each panelist will be given a moment to introduce themselves. But what's important to know up front is that each of these businesses does things their own way, and that's why they're all here. They were selected for the differences in their experience. Some businesses are, say, platforms, and that's their primary business. Some largely focus on building games or experiences using IPs, and then sell directly to consumers. In this group, we have experiences launching products on every major platform, using almost every popular business model in the industry. So there is a lot of knowledge and experience here in Winnipeg, and that's what we're looking to explore. And those, and we also have a lot of innovators here. There's on the panel, there's 2 companies specifically working in virtual reality and mixed reality. So we really do have a little bit of everything here in Winnipeg. So just wrapping this up, I do think that this event will hopefully show that our little city has a lot of experience and a willingness to share knowledge. This is really, really special, and I hope that people who are watching from Winnipeg understand how special this is for a small community of our size. It really does amaze me every day. As for me, well, my day job, I'm co-founder of Zenfry Inc., a company that's been in this business developing primarily our own video game titles since about 2012. Over the years, I've come to personally admire the work of every single one of these panelists, and I've had the fortunate opportunity to work with many of them. Tonight, I hope you can see why I have such admiration for these panelists. So without further ado, we're going to go one by one introducing the panelists, letting them introduce themselves. I will essentially keep it organized and go one by one through everybody. So Derek, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, how you make money in brief.
All right, great. Well, I appreciate you having me here, and I appreciate connecting with you. So my company is Agoki Learnings, and we basically develop language apps for different universities, tribal governments, as well as Native American casinos. And our revenue model is a service-based model. So we charge per app, per client, basically per language. And we also have additional services within that, but it's all basically service. So we don't have any licensing models. We don't have any subscription models, any of those things. My company has developed probably 190 to 200 apps that are currently in the App Store. We've also had 7 apps featured on the front page of Apple iTunes, which is the holy grail of listing your app. And I believe it's probably the most of any company, app development company in Canada. I appreciate you having me. Thanks.
Wow, that's we appreciate you being here. It's a really amazing experience that is very unique to the rest of us, I think. Next, I'm going to go to Leslie Clausen of Flipside.
Thanks, Corey, for inviting me down. My name is Leslie Clausen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Flipside XR. We make a real-time motion capture animation virtual reality app. So basically that means we turn your VR setup into a mocap studio. And we also are building out a VR, it's OTT, it means over the top. It's like a viewership app where you can publish XR content, like similar to like a YouTube for VR. And we're building those 2 apps out right now. And our revenue model is subscription-based. Our customers are animation studios, they're immersive studios, independent artists. We also have received money from platforms like Oculus. We've received CMF projects through the Experimental Fund, and we also have some services. So there's a variety of money that we've received from different ways. As additionally, we've also received venture capital money, and we're a part of 2 accelerators. So, I hope to share some of those insights. And again, I am very excited to be a part of a really great group of panelists. And thanks again, Corey.
No problem. Thank you so much. The VC one I'm particularly inept at, so I'm looking to glean some information about that if I ever decide to go that route. Mark Smith, Bacon Bandit Games. Tell us about yourself.
Sure. So my company is Bacon Bandit Games, and I'm the CEO and co-founder. We've been making games for just over 8 years now. We've done everything from having LetterQuest, which is on consoles, to it's also on mobile, and then we've done other mobile games that are free to play as well. So kind of have a broad sort of exposure to all of that, from, like I say, so premium titles, free to play, and everything kind of in between. And with a couple more titles in the works. Very small company. It's just myself and one other guy. Yeah, hope to be able to keep doing that for a while.
I gotta say, you gotta check out the production values this guy gets out of 2 people. It's amazing. Like, your games are very high quality, and I wish I could do it with 2 people. Unfortunately, I don't really know how to do anything practical, so I'm stuck needing people. I guess we'll go to Dan, BitSpace.
Great. I had myself muted, and I actually remembered to unmute myself before starting to talk.
Well, that's very helpful.
So I'm Dan. I'm the CEO and founder of BitSpace Development. We are a completely bootstrapped firm here in the city. Our focus is entirely in and around XR, immersive technologies, and related technologies. So a lot of VR, AR, a lot of computer vision, AI, machine learning, some hardware development that supports that, specifically through custom VR peripherals and custom edge computing devices for data consumption. Our clients are largely in the education, commercial spaces, and a large amount of defense. So we do a lot of international work as well. Our team is located here in Winnipeg, and we do have a satellite team down in Denver. So we do work quite a lot in and around cross borders development at the moment.
Nice. And the defense thing is, I know it's emerging, but it's extremely interesting. To think that they're like that's it's not even something I would have considered. And then you told me you're working in that, and I was just like, I am so bad at making money. I need to be ahead of some of this stuff. Maybe that's why I'm the one doing the panel, and you guys are the one answering the questions. Noah, Complex Games.
Yeah, okay. So thanks, Corey, and thanks for the invitation. I'm Noah. I run Complex Games, which is a 20-year-old video game development studio here in Winnipeg. To the best of our knowledge, the first game development studio here, though you never know. We right now we've transitioned over the 20 years into a lot of different segments of the video game industry. To some degrees, the sort of tech and app development industry, and have kind of transitioned from a starting point of kind of developing a project for the like the 2000 era premium PC console space, which didn't work out, to doing work for hire, working on all sorts of different business models through the web game, Facebook game, mobile game, kind of rises and falls in the industry, and various others, while working on some other small projects for consoles. And now in the past 3 to 4 years, we've actually moved away from doing work for hire for other studios primarily, and are now working on a super secret project of our own, which is targeting PC console with a premium business model. Oh, and we are currently publishing another title from our past kind of existence as a mobile developer, which is in the free-to-play in-app purchase ad-supported model. So we've kind of touched on a lot of different things in the industry.
Yeah, and in terms of his clients, he kind of downplayed it, but we're talking like Disney and stuff, like not small clients in your history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we worked for Disney, Zynga, Sony, Square Enix. Yeah, a lot. Nickelodeon, bunch of big names over the years.
So we might get into how many of our private conversations are often filled with how we're always exhausted all the time. But we'll start maybe with the optimistic early. I don't know what all of our viewers are doing, but I assume that there's a large segment who aren't making video games. So let's start with or not even just video games, but like interactive. Sorry. But like why did we endeavor on this journey initially is kind of a point of interest. I think we will start with Leslie this time.
So why did Flipside XR happen? Well, really it came from, so I have two other co-founders, John Luxford and Richa Hussain, and we were all working together at actually an education nonprofit doing digital media work. And then we kind of left that group and we kind of all went our own ways. And then we were actually working in VR on a welding project. So it was the first VR project in Manitoba with Complex Games, actually. So we actually worked with Complex. And you know what? For me, I fell in love with VR through creating things. I'm more of a creative type who started playing in Unity, and I started, making some experiences, and I had this kind of like aha VR moment, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. What should I do? I should start a company, because of course, if I start a company, I'm going to be able to create all the time, and which is a bit of a myth around owning a company. But the beautiful part of it was that it was a love for the medium of VR, and knowing that I didn't really want to do anything else, and finding partners, like working with John and Rachel, because I also realized I couldn't do it on my own. One of the biggest things I realized from previous companies that I've started, that I needed some really good support. So it's a love of the medium and finding really good partners to work with, and that became Flipside. And we started as the Campfire Union, actually, which was a very service-oriented company. And then we landed on Flipside because we wanted to make a product in VR, not just a bunch of service work. And that product that we made, this VR motion capture studio, really it comes from the three of us being artists primarily. And so our artist hearts we led with our artist hearts, and then realized we had to really build a business around it. And that's been the evolution of the company, is just really building the business. And that's a whole other skill set that I don't necessarily think it aligns with the heart of the artist, but it does let you eat.
I certainly know. I come from there, and I think I've talked with Noah. There's more than one artist who, I mean, I was even probably anti-business as a young up and comer, and here we are, right, trying to figure out how to make all this stuff work together. So I think we'll go to. It's a little bit Jeopardy music's in my head. I know you can't hear it, but that's what's going on in my head. Mark.
Sure. So yeah, I started my company about 8 years ago, and it's just myself and one other person, like I mentioned. His name's Jake Macher, and he does everything art related. I can't draw to save my life, so he does all the art, animations, and makes everything pretty, and actually makes it something that people want to play. But we both work together at another development company, and we always had a lot of ideas. We were always, spitballing different plans and ideas and game ideas and things. And so when that company wrapped up, we just decided maybe we should try doing something like this. So I moved back to Manitoba because that was in Ontario. And we just started working on things together. Everything was bootstrapped, just myself. I just basically decided I don't need a salary and I don't need money. I'll give this a try with some savings, and that's a little scary and a lot of work, and had a little bit of early success in the App Store with Letterquest. Apple took a liking, to it, so that was nice. But yeah, it was really just one of those things that I've been playing games since I was about 4 years old. Had Nintendo with Rob the Robot, the crazy thing, and was always playing with that, and just been designing games on paper and graph paper and stuff, super nerdy child since I was 4 or 5 years old. So I think this was kind of a natural progression for where life sort of took me.
Yeah, and the bootstrapping thing is interesting as well. Dan, some of us received funding to get started, and both you and Dan bootstrapped it, which I am just so in awe of that. To be honest, I don't know how I could have done it, but you guys have managed to do it, and there's a lot of respect for that. Derek, so why did you start this crazy company that has 200 apps?
Yeah, well, first of all, listening to Dan, Noah, and Les, I have pretty much the exact same story. It started out from a passion of making apps and learning how to create my first app. And I really wanted a trip to Toronto because they were hosting a business competition. So I put together an app, and it just happened to be a language app, submitted it, won the city, won the regional, and then presented as a representative of the province for this TV show, which I presented to, I think, Robert Hershevik from the Dragon's Den. But this was before pre-Dragon's Den. And the great thing is that he gave me some pretty important criticism in that he didn't understand what I was creating. He didn't know too much about apps. So I decided, well, you know what? Don't assume that people know all about apps, and don't assume that they have the vision that you have. I decided that, I was going to release the app for free, and it was the very first app, the Ojibwe app. Went out there, got a few thousand downloads, but more importantly, it got interest of different schools, educational institutions. And I also bootstrapped my own company. I actually have a philosophy, which I'll share later, about going after funding and the time it takes to go after that. But I figured it was more important to go after clients, and they just started rolling in after my first, second, third, fourth app. I just kept raising the price of the app, and people kept, paying that price. And then I started building a better app. So I started the company officially about 5 or 6 years ago, incorporated, moved into a small office. Right now we have 4 employees, but at the height of it, before December of 2019, we had 12 employees working out of that office. So a little bit shifting gears there, but that's basically how I started the company, and that's what it grew from. Basically the passion, the love, the app, and people realizing its importance. So yeah.
And the passion ends up being the thing that lets you take all the knocks that you need for business. To be honest, it's like you're some kind of a madman and you just take abuse. That's at least my experience. But the passion needs to be there. So we don't spend all the time on this one question. If the last two, Noah and Dan, can answer this like laser fast, but still with all that heart and spirit. Dan, why'd you start?
I don't know how to not do it. So I'm here because I started my company by accident, which led to projects, which I was very interested in, and I actually have no idea how to stop having a company, and so I just keep pushing harder. And maybe I can expand on that in future questions, and I'll give it over to Noah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'll try to do it quick. I think I got into games because it was kind of inevitable for whatever reason. My whole youth was just sort of tied up in games, all sorts of different kinds of games with, friendships and interests, and that was just like my life growing up. So it was natural to try and figure out, okay, well, how do I do this as, a career? And, at the time that you have to figure out these things, there's almost no information. Nobody knew how to get into the game industry. Like the internet was barely becoming a thing at that point. And I was lucky enough to have good friends who had grown up in a similar kind of way. And we all really wanted to do the same thing. And so that's just kind of the light bulb moment. Really, when I was just getting out of university, we were having another conversation about, like we should really try this, like this is the time to do it. We didn't know any better how complicated it would be, and so we just barreled into it, and also bootstrapped until we eventually raised like a tiny dinky amount of money from friends and family, and like our first try was a failure, and then somehow we recovered, and we've had many failures since, but we've been kind of surviving, learning, and growing through failure. Yeah.
I think that's a good point. I can't speak for everybody, and I'm not going to call everybody a failure, but I'm pretty sure most of us have had some significant failures that you were probably under the naive illusion would have just ended you, and it didn't.
That brings us to our next question.
Hey, I'm trying to knit this like a scarf. But yeah, so, everyone has major changes, major evolutions. I don't know, some companies seem to find something and just keep doing that thing. But oftentimes it's an evolution. And I also, another component of this question is sort of, I'm getting the sense, and I feel it sometimes too, where it's like, I just stumbled in it and I don't know how to stop. Dan said that, or Leslie, like you're trying to be the creator. And it's like, at some point, like the businesses kind of start to dictate to you a little bit, like you want this freedom, but you're sort of like, this is how I make money. I would love to pivot, but that's scary, right? But sometimes you have to pivot. Sometimes you decide to pivot. So let's talk about like, was your company what it still is today, or was there this major shift, or many major shifts, but do it briefly, that put you where you are today? Like, and just a little bit about those decisive moments that made what you are versus what you thought you were going to be. I guess, sorry, I got to say who. Derek.
Yeah, we all start out with a really grand vision where we're going to save the manatees here, but I just knew that, my app was so simple, and it didn't turn out to be an educational company. What I meant to do was release the source code for free and then have everyone else make their own apps. And it just steamrolled into, they were lazy basically, and they wanted me to make their apps. So I continuously made their apps, and we started to get into games. We released this app called Resbomb, and got invited down to Palo Alto and met with, who's that guy that created Quake? Romero.
Talking about Romero, John
Yeah.
Romero.
Yeah, so presented the game to him. He liked it. He thought it was hilarious. And he talked to me about, I think it was, what was that? He had some sort of program that he was on the board of directors for. What was it? It was like a development platform. Anyways, he talked to me a little bit about that, and it gave me a lot of insight into, where I should be going with that. And I think it was, what do they call it now? Corona now, but what was it before? Corona SDK. I forget what it was, but basically he talked to me about that, and he talked to me about the difficulties in getting that app out. So I decided, I'm going to stick with what I have. I'm not going to venture out into game development. I'm going to stay here. So that's basically the evolution, a little bit of a pivot, but it was more of a refocusing.
Yeah, you almost wanted to reach into games, but what you were doing worked, and there was kind of a lot of risk factors. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Now, flip side, you already I referred to as your company. I'm sorry, Leslie. Leslie,
It's fine.
flip side used to be called the Campfire Union. You touched on this a little bit. That's a pretty big shift. Not only is it, a lot of us do the shift and we kind of don't tell people about it. We just keep the brand.
Yeah.
But you guys even went whole hog with this like new direction and rebranded and everything. What's up with that? Why'd you do that?
Yeah. So the story actually is, first of all, we were bootstrapped as well. So we started off just like figuring out, and we started off making, our first slogan was, we make web apps and games, right? Or web apps and serious games. And we ended up making websites and e-learning content for a while. And the realization is that if you want to really make some money, or at least try to make some money, you need a way to sell a product. And if you're constantly selling a service, you're limiting the amount you can scale. And so we just realized we needed to, and we were so early in VR. Started VR in like 2013 is when the first headsets came out. Oculus's Kickstarter came out in 2013. We were already in there, and we're like, one of the advantages we have is we have this thing called first mover advantage. If we really just double down, become experts in this field, and we think product, what could go wrong? And so I remember in 2015 we were starting to get into VR, and I was sure it was going to be huge. And it was holiday season 2015, it was going to blow up, and then I've realized now it's 2020 and we're at the bottom of the hockey stick curve in terms of the VR market. But the whole idea was that we had to figure out something that had to scale. And it became a business problem, and plus a passion problem, but it had to scale.
Well, client work is tough. You end up reinventing something new every time, or you end up being so focused that you're just really remaking the same thing, and that kind of becomes passionless a little bit, perhaps. But I want to ask you one question very, very quickly. I would want a one-word answer. Is first mover actually ever an advantage in your opinion?
I think for us it was.
Okay, cool. Noah.
Yeah, so
I know it's 20 years.
When we started, which is 2000 really, the thing to remember is that the way the industry was, the way it evolved, the game industry anyways, was that there was really only one way to make games and to sell them, and that was the studio model, the publisher model, and the notion that a couple of folk in their garage could make a game in that environment and then get it through to distribution was remote, right? Like that had fallen away and had become impractical. And the thing, like the way that everyone talked at that time and the limited amount of information that you could really generate from the internet or whatever on the industry was, all right, so if you want to make a game, if you want to get it to people, then you need a publisher. And so you need to go through the whole process of building something, pitching it to a publisher, getting financing. It has to be enough financing. So it's going to be at a scale that they're willing to put it on a console or publish it on PC and put it on store shelves, because physical distribution was way more complicated, way more expensive than digital. And like we didn't have all the distribution platforms we have now. So we did that. And we became this like garage indie studio when there really were very, very few, and nobody really knew much of any of them that existed at that time, trying to build up a demo for a product that we could pitch to a publisher. And that was kind of, like I mentioned before, our first failure. And we actually got really far, and we got together something really impressive technologically for such a small studio filled with total noob developers. We got pretty far in what we put together, but we just weren't composed as a business at that time. As a company, we didn't have a track record, and so pitching that to the industry events was really not practical. And, that's one of the things we had to learn. We had to learn how important it is to be able to develop the relationships over long term, to be able to have a reputation that other investors or publishers can buy into. And so that almost killed us as an entity, and it really slowed us down. But what happened is that we're really like, I don't know what you'd say, like I'm really blunt-headed. I just sort of power through problems sometimes. And eventually what we did is we just said, okay, well, let's try and keep this going. Let's find whatever work we can. And so we started out doing anything that a company with video game development skills could do. So we ended up doing animation work. We ended up doing kind of web application development work. We started that, and then kind of to Les's point earlier about how if you're just kind of like selling a service, you get in this bad loop. It's really hard to kind of quantify your value and put, build a trajectory for a company that's going to make sense and that it's actually going to bring value to you without a specialization in a product. So what we were able to do over a long period of time was to focus. And we stopped doing animation, we stopped doing application development, and we focused as closely as possible on games, and then games of a certain type. And then we started to shift our focus in doing work for hire to where the biggest platform growth was, but where all of the established players weren't in. And so in one case that was in the 2010 era, 2007 era maybe, that was like web games. And then in 2009, 2010, that was Facebook. And then it was mobile, and all of these things had their kind of like upward arcing trajectory, where all of the established players in the industry, like the bigger companies that were doing development work in AAA, they weren't interested in any of that. And so that let a company like us kind of jump in and ride the wave of enthusiasm and growth in the market so that we could develop our expertise and then a reputation and so on. So that was kind of like our cycle into work for hire and growth, and we got really big. And then once you get big and work for hire, you have this problem where you just keep kind of needing to feed the beast. You need kind of like bigger and bigger or more and more projects, and it becomes very hard to figure out, okay, how do we stop this thing so that we can get a handle on where we need to go? But so that's like nutshell.
I know some people who are in the potentially getting into the growth phase, feed the beast phase. It sounds scary. I just want I don't know if raise hands work due to how the Google Meets picks. So I just want everyone to call out quickly before I go to the next two people. Who has done work for hire? Or basically I'll just say, have you done work for hire? Because I kind of want, because it's one of these things of like, so Derek, you've done work for hire?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, everyone will need to actually say it so that Google puts you on the screen. Dan.
Yes.
Leslie.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
And we already heard from Noah. So I just want that to kind of resonate with people. I don't think any of us really want to be doing that, generally speaking. Or if we do, we find a way to make that the thing that we like, and we find a way, it's like a dance, a little massage. But like, you need to see it. It's like, I still do like work for hire, but I primarily don't do work for hire, but I still do work for hire, and I just think the people who aren't doing this need to kind of recognize that even if we don't put it on our website, we might be doing work for hire secretly in the background to feed the beast. Dan.
So yeah, I do work for hire. My company's evolved a lot over the years. We started out initially with an idea that I was going to get started in web VR because I was thinking future at that point. Everyone's talking about the DK2. I'm thinking web VR, and there was no market, so that was foolish. But I started out building a platform in that space, and I could answer your question of biggest failures, pivots, and how I started my company all in one answer here. Is I started building out a platform at the time for managing web VR content that I spent a lot of money on, that I funded completely through work for hire work and eventually canceled. And I learned a lot through that process, and to be fair, I have salvaged a lot of what I learned and what we built over the years to become our current products. But in the more recent history, especially with how we've gone into the pandemic, is we are actually a combination of work for hire and services and products. I mean, so we both have software as a service platforms that we have clients that subscribe to from all over North America and all over the place, but we also have work for hire services. So our work kind of is a mixture of licensed content, subscription model content, and completely custom, like bespoke innovation services. And I am, I guess, suppose the complete opposite in the sense from everyone, in the sense that I completely embraced the work for hire and custom content, and I leaned right in on having clients and building up a client pool and building out what those services mean. I have felt that has been fairly challenging in the VR space over the past few years, especially because we didn't have any external funding, at least like in VC sense. Until recently, we don't have investors still, but we have received external funding sources at this point, specifically federal funding, provincial funding, and other innovation services that exist, like Western economic diversification, et cetera. And so like we have been able to fund some of our innovation work to focus on our products through those, but we had to build up a lot of capacity before we got to that point. And so, yeah, like I've pivoted my company multiple times in the past and even revived that initial project to become something very specific, which we call VR safety today. And it powers a large amount of our business at BitSpace.
And I think you and Flipside both have that sense of like a lot more and more you're trying to make that work for hire work fit into the platform advantage. It's like I probably couldn't go to Flipside and be like, make something totally not related to Flipside. Maybe I could for enough money, but like generally speaking, you're trying to tie.
Maybe, yeah, Corey, we should talk.
Oh, I'm not saying I got the money.
You got money? I'm looking for work.
Oh, jeez. Let's move on from that. Mark. So yeah.
Sure. So yeah, a bunch of pivots over the year, a little different than everybody else. I think mine early on was kind of a technology pivot. So I wrote my first game with my own company in Flash, and that was back when you could use something called Starling, a framework, and was using that for mobile. That was because the job I had previously was doing all Flash programming. So I thought, hey, I'll crank something out quick with this. It started to die a pretty quick death, I would say, shortly after I released my first game, which is not a great place to be in when you're a two-man shop. So I made the fun decision, along with the help of advice of a publisher, to basically take that game and port it to Unity when I wasn't too familiar with Unity at the time. And luckily that ended up being a really good choice because it opened up a lot of doors. I was able to bring that game to Xbox One, and I did that port on my own. So got a dev kit, arranged all that, got that figured out. I hired out to another company to handle PlayStation 4, PS Vita, and the Wii U and the Switch now for that same title. And actually, basically every game I've worked on or prototype or made afterwards is essentially using that framework that I built with that. So that was actually a good thing in retrospect, but that was kind of a big changeover because you've got 4 months or so where you're porting something and I'm not doing much else because it's just me working on the tech side. And then a couple of years ago, I'd say about 3 years ago, I decided to go from that, which was a premium title, to trying a free-to-play mobile game. And that was another big pivot, another lot of things to learn, totally different approach, working with a different publisher. Again, just kind of like upend and change everything that way. Still the same tech at least, but yeah. So now I'm kind of stuck between both. I'd say at this point, where I'm equally likely to do my next title as either a premium title, maybe for consoles and PC and such, or free to play. And it's not a bad thing because now I've got contacts and everything on both sides. So I'd say that's helpful. But those would definitely be the major ones. So kind of a tech pivot early on, and then going from premium to free to play.
And with the mobile to console thing, I was surprised to see you go from like letterquest to like an idle clicker. If you can just briefly explain why you decided to go to like an idle click style game.
Sure. It's actually because I love playing games, and the whole time since I started this company, probably like a lot of people on this panel and other business owners, I found I didn't have a lot of time for games and like to actually play them anymore. So for me, I was finding more and more my phone was filling up with idle games. It's a quick like 2 minute thing I can do. And it definitely wasn't the like, hey, let's do some cash grab thing. That wasn't it at all. It was, these are actually kind of fun because this is all I have time for. I don't have time to jump into like Final Fantasy anymore or anything like that. Whereas I can, open up some like Clicker Heroes or something and play that for 30 seconds and maybe then I get interrupted. And so I thought, hey, how hard can it be to make one of these? And it was probably 5 or 6 times longer development than I expected it to be. But I think it worked out in the end.
Actually, it's one of the only idle clickers, not that I'm like looking for them, but that I actually played significant lengths of time where I got all the way down to like the core of the earth and had the game kind of do that reset thing.
Nice.
So I was pretty like, I had a bias towards idle clickers, and then I saw that you made one, and I have a positive bias towards you and a negative bias towards idle clickers. So then I was like, well, maybe I'm the idiot. And so I started playing that idle clicker, and I started to understand the value of those games. So everyone's games teaches everybody else. So I'm going to kind of condense these 3 questions that no one else knows what these questions are, but you guys do, into kind of one, which is how did you initially get going? Most people, once they initially get going, have something that gives them a little bump, but maybe not. And then what are you doing now primarily to like have the cash to operate your business? So it's like just 1, 2, 3, a little bit explanation, but just give us all a sense of like that journey. Because basically, I assume either companies, we're always looking for better ways to fund ourselves or more freedom or bigger projects. And when you're getting started, you're just looking for that first couple of dollars to rub together. So what was that for each of you? We'll just go back to you, Mark, to start.
Sure. So yeah, at the very start, that was just literally funds I had in my bank account that I'd saved up from previous jobs. And then after I finished LetterQuest, I kind of touched on it earlier a little bit, but Apple, I released it, and I got an email from Apple randomly because I hadn't applied for anything. I didn't know anything about promoting mobile titles at all or anything. And I was like, oh, I got this email from Apple's programs basically saying, hey, we want to get these assets from you, some marketing assets. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. I don't even know why they want this. And of course, they were doing a feature because this is what they do. And got a feature with that early on. Unfortunately, didn't have very good monetization strategy put in that game on mobile. It was free to play. It was very, very, very friendly to players, like overly so, to the point where it didn't make a lot when it did that. But that was definitely enough to kind of kickstart things and fund, the porting work I did and all the rest of that. And that kind of led to everything else. And then since then, basically just ongoing revenue from my mobile titles like Tap Tap Dig 1 and 2 now, and still ongoing revenue coming in on consoles from LetterQuest. That's more than enough to cover all the bills. I mean, we're just 2 people, so it's a little bit easier maybe than if we had more, but that covers all the bills plus some extra, and is enough to fund the next project and kind of just been building off that.
I mean, it sounds hard, like really, really hard. And I obviously didn't take that exact route, but it sounds also kind of romantic. Like to just be like, I made a game, it made money, I make more games, it makes more money, kind of like, and I know it's not hitting these huge scales, but it's enough to keep you going. And I think that's really cool. And just like the passive revenue thing.
One important thing to touch on, just for anybody watching though, that being said, at the end of LetterQuest, I had no money left, and before I released it, and tapped into my RSPs, which was probably a terrible idea, but I did it anyway, and was basically going, how am I going to buy groceries next week? Not necessarily a strategy I recommend to anybody. If you can have some funding, maybe that's a good idea, maybe a safety net. I kind of went all in, but I think that's an important thing too. If you're wanting to do this and do that, you need to be willing to lose everything you put in, because that's a very, very likely possibility.
And even when you do get money from somewhere, there's always a way you can lose your house and everything. So, and it's definitely important to keep that sobriety to it all. And the other thing that's interesting that I just want to highlight that you said is you had this great fortune that was still fortunate, but underutilized that you sort of learned. It's sort of like you'd be so stoked that you're on the App Store and getting all these downloads, and that's when you learn the terrible lesson of you didn't have the knowledge to actually capitalize on that, which is its own kind of bitter irony, But obviously, you learned a lot and kept going. So I'm trying to make it random, but it's really, I don't know. Noah.
Sure. Yeah. So when we started, I guess we were really fortunate that we were still either just coming out of school or, in and around that period of time in our lives where we were either in part-time jobs or full-time jobs, and we could get started working on the idea and developing our skills part-time. So we kind of like got together and said, hey, we're going to try this, we're going to do this, and then we're going to meet regularly and try and make progress. And so we kind of started that way, bootstrapped that way. We had no money. And then after a while, we kind of came into focus on what we wanted to do as a project. And we had this goal we were able to come up with, which was actually the Independent Games Festival project submission. So way back in 2011, I think, 2012. And so we said, all right, we need the time to do this. So we're just going to focus now on this full time. We're going to take that risk. We're all lucky enough that we could just kind of like stay at, our family homes or whatever, and pay minimal rent or keep a part-time job throughout that process and just gun it for about 7 or 8 months. And then by the end of it, we were like basically living in each other's basements, working on this project, trying to get ready for deadline. So that was kind of like the first phase where we had nothing. And then by the end of it, we had this something that we submitted to the festival. And, it was pretty impressive for this group of nobodies who'd never done anything like this before. So we actually used that demo project to raise money with friends and family, which is a really challenging thing to do and a very difficult thing to do for a company in the long run. So we actually raised a tiny amount of money from like 20 people. But that gave us kind of the seed capital to rent a very tiny office, very cheap office, and then try and really focus on polishing what it is we were putting together. And then, we ultimately burnt through that money trying to pitch that project, and then transition to the inspiration moment of, okay, well, we've got to pay the bills if we're going to keep doing this. And gradually kind of meandered to partial work, so part-time jobs while we're still trying to figure this out. Actually went back to school for a bit to study my grad studies. And then we sort of came back to it with a full focus on work for hire and started to get contracts. And that really helped kick this off to the point where we could, go back to it full time, so we could keep, our heads above water, pay the bills, minimal amount of salary, but we slowly ratcheted up from that.
And there's that careful thing in terms of like Mark, and I'm not sure why, it could just be resource-wise, you chose to stay small, but there is a lot of like getting big too fast is its own kind of nightmare too. Not that you've necessarily done that, but it's like, everyone, I think one thing that I think is being underlined by everyone is you go in with these rose-colored glasses and you think the office is what I need, and I need more people, and like they all come with their own things that aren't publicized in the newspaper about why it's so great to do this. They all have these negative traits to them. All right. One thing I'm going to do in this little piece here, we're still asking the question, but I'm curious, a similar question before where I want everyone to answer. Has anybody, I know some people have, but VC capital specifically, there's lots of ways to raise funds, but who here has at any point received VC capital? So Leslie, say yes.
Yes.
So that pop on the screen. And is that it? Okay, because I wanted to bundle that into that question. Since there was a separate question about VC money, but you're the only one who's gotten it, we might as well bundle that into your whole how did you get funded, and just give us a little bit extra on that VC experience, because at least with American culture, that's super emphasized as the proper way to raise money. You're a legitimate business if you do VC, and maybe not if you don't. That's not necessarily how I feel, but you actually took that route and received VC money, which is sort of incredible. And all of these people who have successful businesses have not. So that puts it in some stark contrast. So as you talk about your sort of growth in the funding, answer the same question, but when you get to the VC part, if you can just explain the process in a way that won't make it so that you can never raise funds again.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll start. We started off with, we actually landed like quite a significant large service contract. And so that was our seed money. And we made sure we built in our margins in that first service contract so that we could actually use that money to start growing the company. And then we continued to do lots of work for hire. So we had at one time 12 or 13 pretty like consistent clients that we were just making content. And it reached that point where I was talking about earlier. And we also built a virtual relaxation app that we sold in the App Store in VR like really early on. And we built a game called Lost Cities, and we got some platform money. So one thing that's interesting about that type of money is that when you're doing something that's brand new and there's a new platform, and the platforms themselves, and this was Oculus, they're looking to bring a certain level of quality content in their platforms, and they're willing to start doling out cash because they just need content. So first mover advantage, being early on, we made the world's first virtual reality board game, and that gave us some early cash. We had this big service contract. Somewhere along the way, we realized, we're going to loop and go in circles with this service thing forever. So what do? We're going to make this basically turning VR into like the ability to create like real-time cartoons and animations. And there was a venture capitalist in San Mateo, which is just a little bit south of San Francisco. And they have this, it's called Boost VC. It's kind of like the Y Combinator for future tech. So they do blockchain, AI, machine learning, and virtual reality, augmented reality, that kind of stuff. So to be honest, I was learning what the term value proposition meant at the time, which is like basically the core of any VC investment is that you need to understand the value that you bring to a customer. So if you're making a game, your customer is a player, right? If you're making a product like we did, our customer would be like an animation studio or a digital artist. And so suddenly you needed to start to understand the mechanics of a business. And if you're going to get venture capital money, venture capitalists really want one thing. You put a dollar in this little black box and $10 come out. And they really don't care what that black box is. As long as you can prove that you can create some sort of business mechanic in there, that a dollar equals $10, they love you. Another advantage of first mover advantage, here's another one, is when you're in a really new medium like VR, nobody knows how to monetize VR. So you don't really have that black box where you put the dollar in, the 10 comes out. Nobody knows what that is. So really, they're investing in you as a person when you're early on. So we had a really good prototype with a really interesting idea. We were one of the first companies that were doing multiplayer work in VR. And so this investor, the way we won, we first got into an accelerator first. And then from the accelerator, we got a follow-on, which was the venture capital money. So what happened is we got this investor in our demo, and because he hadn't done a lot of multiplayer VR experiences, like we just blew his mind. And he was just like, this is amazing. And he gave us a call like literally right afterwards. And he's like, what do you guys want? We want you down at this accelerator. And we're like, okay. So they gave us initially a certain investment that comes with coming down with the accelerator. And I moved down to San Mateo, and I lived in a hotel converted into like a private university for 4 months. That was kind of themed like Harry Potter meets like Marvel superheroes. It was a really weird. One thing I realized is when you get into VC land and you get into that kind of big US money, people in that realm see the world differently, and they live the world. They live like this. Our main investor's father invested in Tesla and Hotmail and Skype, and it was like and he was a fourth generation venture capitalist. And it's a world I really still to this day I don't really understand. Like I totally feel like I stick out like a weirdo in the crowd because because I didn't really understand what that VC money was all about. And so I went down to San Mateo, and meanwhile, the team stayed up here in Winnipeg, and the secret is that the product was good, and the team kept on making really great product improvements. And so because the product was, and we had to prove ourselves to this VC that there was some sort of value we could bring. And so what we did is we decided to make weekly animation. So every week we released an animated show, like a 10-minute or a 5-minute kind of show made in our platform. And we did them week after week after week after week. And we were proving that we could make animated content so fast that the investors saw our value proposition. In fact, the investors saw our value proposition before we really understood our value proposition. And so along the way, when you're in that VC accelerator land, you start understanding the lingo, you start understanding what investors are looking for, you start understanding how to start to position your company, how to tell a good story. One of the things that we didn't have for us is that we didn't have like a Google or Apple employee as a founder. So in Silicon Valley, if you've got like a Google co-founder, like ex-engineer at Google, ex-person at Apple, these institutional investors just kind of like drool over that. They think it's something special or magical. But what we also learned is that that's all BS. Like the reality is that Winnipeggers have developers and engineers and people here that are just as good as anywhere else in the world. You don't have to spend $150,000 a year to bring in someone from San Francisco. Not saying that engineers aren't worth $150,000, but just saying like these ideas of like, oh, we can't do it here. And so what we learned from this experience is that we have all the talent and everything right here is we just needed to learn that presentation layer, how to present the company, how to tell the story of the company, how to convert how to convince an investor that $1 is going to become $10. And what was really unique with us is at the end of our 4-month stay in San Mateo, I got an email from the head of the accelerator. He just said, I want to meet you tomorrow. I'm like, okay, sure, great. He sat down with us and he just said, we want to put $250,000 into your company. We believe what you're doing. We think that you have a great vision and we love what's going on. So it was kind of blew my mind because at that time we were pitching to like the investors that funded Apple, and we were investing and all these big VR investors, and it was just super overwhelming and extremely stressful. But what happened is somebody saw our company and what we were doing and where we were going and believed in us, and so we had to craft that story. And especially when you're early on, when you don't have any evidence that the market's worth anything, when you can't even really prove that there is actually value that you're bringing, it's really about your team, how you execute, what your passion is, and that you're willing to be coachable. The investors love that term, coachable, but meaning you're willing to align your actions towards business growth rather than just being just the artist who can't let go of being an artist. So it was a combination of all those things. And then we also won some pitch contests and things at the same time and got into another accelerator in Toronto. And we just started building up that seed capital that you really need to start building out the product. And now what we're doing is we've got this product. We have a companion product that we went to the CMF with. The CMF did some funding for us. So now we're in a CMF project. And so we're still going to market. We're still figuring out our go-to-market strategy. We're just starting to get the mechanics of the business in such a way that the investor that invested in us can see the return. So we're starting to just build the sales pipeline. We're still kind of creating and crafting that business, but it really comes down to having a belief in where you're going, proving you've got value, understanding the story of your company. And it's especially early on. So I could go into all the mistakes we made and all that kind of stuff, and but that's fundamentally the seed of how we got our venture capital.
I think it's the word coachability that's kept me totally out of that space. But I'm not looking for investors, but I'm slowly becoming a little bit more coachable. Life's hard, just saying. That's probably why I want to have this talk, because you start with these ideological, almost like this is how business is, or for me it was like it's all about the art and the freedom to do what you want, and I'll take sacrifices to keep that. But at the end of the day, it's like all this stuff is hard, and everyone finds a path, and you start to find yourself being like, was it just ideological? You know, like, am I just being a dummy? You know, like probably in my case, but that was really great insight, and so you know, you're the guy to go to if anyone else wants to follow that path, because it sounds brutal to go down to the States. They're scary people. You know, they scare me, like they're intimidating. I don't mean like they're Marilyn Manson. Derek, tell us about your funding and you know, how you initially got funded and kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, first of all, I love listening to Les's story, and I think that he brings up some important points. I actually saw Les at the airport a couple times. I think I saw you in Denver, and I think I saw you also in the Winnipeg airport. He was flying down to Silicon Valley, and then here I was flying out to, I think it was Phoenix, Arizona. My story is a little bit different. So I decided that I was going to create a single product. I wanted to get it into the App Store, and I wanted to get it publicized. Now, as soon as the clients started to see that, then I had to create business material for that. I had to request for quote system and all the paperwork and the pricing guide and everything. So once I had 1, 2, 5, 10 clients that were willing to see the value proposition in what I was providing them for the money, then the other clients started to follow. So it was a service-based model. I, of course, bootstrapped it myself. I started from my basement as a one-man show, doing apps before work at 8:30 in the morning, and then coming home and then, you know, raising a family and then doing apps till 2 or 3 in the morning. So if you're not willing to put in that grind, no one else is willing to put in the grind for you, and they're not willing to invest in your company. But all the hard work, if you want to create a game, if you want to create a business, it takes hard work. Now, my model is that if I release 100 apps for 100 different clients, and the apps that I have, you know, you see them all the time. They're language apps, you know. They're learning games, so they have a little bit of interactivity with that, and you know, they're searching through different puzzles, or they're searching through different word games, all that stuff. So the gamification there. But once one client orders something, and then let's say iOS 12 comes out, so then if there's a new feature that you can include in your app, you just have to build it one time and then apply that one time to that template. So 100 clients at an app upgrade at $5,000 or $10,000, that would be $100,000 to close to $1 million that you'd get just because your app upgraded from 32-bit to 64-bit. So you're working in the, you know, $500,000 range for just that one upgrade. Now, if you had a search feature to your app with 200 apps and different clients, that then multiplies to $2 million. So you know, creating an app for iPhone, creating an app for Android, we built that price into these upgrades. So now we have a sales team that just blasts out emails, say, you know, iOS 12 is coming out. All your apps have to be 64-bit. They will not support any 32-bit upgrades. This is the package that we can upgrade your app at. So we're upgrading the app. It takes roughly a day or two to upgrade and then resubmit the app with new artwork. And you know, you continuously have that model. So we can expect a new operating system upgrade every year. And then that model also translates to Android as well. So that's how, you know, we're making money. That's how we're keeping the lights on and more. And over, you know, the 5 years that we've been in business, started from the basement company, very successful. You know, 12 employees was a lot for me. And then I figured that, you know, I could semi-retire at the age of, you know, 42. And the company can continuously use that model to make money. And the money just, you know, we don't have any development costs, really. We don't have any R&D costs, really. All we're doing is just upgrading apps after apps after apps. And that's our model there. So it's not just a one-off app. It's a template that we designed that each client could say, you know, I love this client's app. I want an app exactly like it. And then the next school goes after that. And then the next tribe goes after that. Then the next Native American casino goes after that. And instead of me developing and writing the code anymore, now I'm the front man for the company. You know, I certainly miss diving into the code and making all these apps, but I have app developers that are going to do that. And they're willing to go out and train our clients on how to upgrade their own apps and how to make their own apps. So what we found was that, you know, not only this upgrade and this service and this product, but we could also have an additional service for training dollars. So if we go out to a client for 5 days, we charge them $8,500 US. So if we have 2 staff going to different cities, you know, 3 weeks out of the 4 weeks, it's such a huge revenue model for the amount of work that we're putting in, because we're delivering the exact same course. We're delivering the exact same 5-day intensive program. And our staff love going out on the road because we pay our staff an additional salary, basically doubling their salary. And then if they sell an app on the road, you know, they get 5 or 10 or 15% of the overall cost of the app. So if we charge $100,000 for an app, the staff get, you know, $15,000. So some of our staff, for instance, in December, and I don't mind talking about money. One of our staff made $15,000 in just the month of December, you know, and then they're making, you know, $8,000 to $12,000 in all the subsequent months, because not only are they training, but they're also showing and demoing new apps, and then they're applying for different funding. So the clients that we started to focus on were, of course, the schools, and then we started to introduce games to help their students learn. And then we started to focus on, well, who is actually paying for this app? So we found out that, of course, it was the casinos, because the Native American casinos, and you think of it in terms of a tribal casino, right? It's not very big. It's on a reserve, and chances are, you know, it's the fraction of the size of a Las Vegas casino. So what we started to do, myself, is that we started to market our product to these casinos, right? Saying, you know, this is a revitalization efforts. This is, you know, what we're doing. Our marketing package exemplifies, you know, who originally got this app and all these other things. But we realized quickly that Native American casinos were 49% of the entire casino revenue of the United States. So we quickly expanded into the United States. Now, if you think of it, Bally's, MGM Grand, Mandalay Bay, all these huge casinos, there's so much companies that are going after that market that we decided to offer our app development expertise into the Native American market. So I'm Native American, I'm Ojibwe. Now, me going to the Native American casino and saying, you know, this is our expertise, this is how much apps we've done, this is the TED Talk that we've done, the market experience. We've worked with 4 of the 5 largest tribes in California, and they absolutely love us. This is our package. So we sell them an app, and we could sell 4 or 5 apps a month at a base price of $10,000 to $125,000 US. So quickly selling all these apps and enter the market, and then start to upgrade all these apps, that is our revenue model. So we haven't had, I hate reading. If you send me an email longer than a paragraph, I will put it in my 2-paragraph folder. So I couldn't apply for venture capitalist money because I hate reading, and I hate going through paperwork, and I hate financials. I would rather just focus on meeting the CEO face to face and selling them on our product. So as a game developer, as an app developer, you have got to become specialized in sales. You've got to say, you know, this is my market return, this is my black box, this is our product. And in fact, I'll tell you a little bit about this later, but, you know, being where I am now, it allows me access to educational institutions, universities that are developing software but don't have the means to release that software. So, you know, we didn't go for venture capitalist. we bootstrapped it, started out of the basement, and then we built a model that supports us and allows me to do things, allows our clients to do things, our salespeople, and allows our app developers to get a huge return. So, yeah.
That was pretty amazing and kind of mind blowing, and makes me feel like you're like on another level. And and really interesting. One thing I was thinking earlier on when you talked about you monetize the app update cycle, the phone update cycle. That put me in a totally different mindset than I ever had before, because I am always dreading those things because I got to pay to do the upgrades. I didn't think of it as Christmas, but like for your business, that's like, come on, new iPhone, man, just break the old builds,
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And it is Christmas. You know what I mean? I remember one time we had an open house, and people think of you as an app developer. They think as less as an app developer, and they think of all of us as app developers. Now, with an app developer mentality and an app developer lifestyle, they think you're a rock star. Okay, they want to hang out with you. They want to do all these things, and that becomes the marketing effort as well. So, with the new release, you have display problems on your app. You might have black bars. You might have recent. All these problems, we don't see it as problems. We see it as opportunity. But you're right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dan, your turn.
Okay, well, for this, how I got started with my funding in my company, and how I'm ultimately going to pivot now into my new monetization strategy, which is just selling for Derek. So BitSpace, I founded all the way back in late 2014, getting started more full-time in 2015. And at the time, I managed to get started with a pretty sizable project similar to Leslie, and not the same project, just similar in spirit to how Campfire at the time had gotten started. And I remember we actually sat down at a table pretty early on to meet each other way back in the day when I had a small office with a couple students working for me, and you guys were down the street from me at the time. And the funny thing about BitSpace is I kind of accidentally started it. So I had intended to take a leave of absence from the job that I had at the time, where I was a mobile programmer for a e-commerce firm here in the city. And I was going to return to that job at the end of the summer after doing a project and getting some experience working with a few students. Now, one of the things that I said earlier was I don't know how to stop doing this. And so I, as that project wrapped up and I didn't actually know how to stop doing my company, I decided I better figure out some funding real quick, and immediately started trying to sell some more projects. That was successful because I am still here today. But a little known fact about BitSpace is that the bit and a fairly common theme is I'm not very good at naming things. The bit actually comes from Bitcoin, and some of our initial applications were in the cryptocurrency space, but most of the money that I used to bankroll the first part of my company came from investments in cryptocurrencies at the time. You may say, man, you sold cryptocurrencies back in 2014. Don't you feel stupid? No, because I have a company and I support my family with that company. And I have 3 kids, all of whom are supported with that company. So it was a solid investment. But yeah, BitSpace was originally funded with crypto coins, specifically Bitcoin. And I'll talk to anybody about that stuff later. But over the course of the years that I've been kind of slogging along at this, I figured it's probably pretty good to diversify how I get my funding. And so one of the things that I said earlier was that we kind of diversified in the sense that we have our products, which are SaaS tools and subscription services. We have our licensed content, and we have our bespoke content. So the bespoke content is largely a one-time payment where we're building custom content for a firm, whether that's a VR simulator to do X, Y, or Z, or a project to do this. But a lot of our content is our own IP as well that we license, and we charge for the updates as well, similar to how Derek operates. Often that would be either through platform updates or hardware updates or new features that the clients want to unlock. And that comes out of our frameworks, one of which is called CSS. Our subscription models is through VR Safety, which currently has plenty of companies that pay us a yearly subscription to access the tooling. We've since changed that to be software as a service style model as opposed to just a subscription to a service. So I started BitSpace because I liked to tinker, and pretty much everything in the room behind me is a representation of me. And those of you in this call that know me well know exactly what I'm like to be around, and that is that I am pretty obsessed with hardware and hacking with hardware and hacking with software and just building interesting stuff. And usually I say shit, but I didn't say shit this time. So I have really been focused on tinkering as a core business model to BitSpace. Most of our products have come out of either hack weekends or just kind of like exploring technology and showing people what we've done. So building a product in my garage that leverages our computer vision modules and our object detection algorithms that we developed, and just showing that to clients that exist and solving problems for them. I've been fairly lucky in the sense that what I happen to tinker in has been fairly monetizable and become products, but I have also struggled with turning some things into products in the past as well. So I've had to pivot many a times, and similar to Mark, I've been in situations where maybe I should have been smarter about monetizing early before I had to dip into certain funds or make difficult decisions to still exist today. And part of that comes with growth over the as a business owner and being in that mindset. But BitSpace started largely through cryptocurrencies and being lucky with getting a couple projects, continued to exist through not knowing how to stop and a necessity to sell, and continues to grow now and thrive through my ability to continuously hack in my garage, which is actually kind of complemented by the fact I'm stuck at home all the time.
The tinkering part is normally where I come in, because I always come to you with projects that it's like, Dan, this is not going to make any money for anybody. But it's going to be fun. And that's where we interface a lot and don't make any money, but we have fun.
Hey, we've managed to make money on some of those in the past. And we've also managed to lose some money.
Oh, yes, definitely. So to be conscious of time, I'm sort of going to ask each of you one sort of quick question of best part about being a boss or owning your own business, worst part. And you can't, Derek, I got to say, not retiring at 45. It doesn't resonate with the audience, so find something else, because that's too good of an answer. You can retire. And then if there is any time left, I sort of want to give everyone a chance to ask at least one question of the rest of the panelists. If everyone enjoyed this, and I haven't been paying attention to Twitch, I can definitely see doing this again, because I feel like we went wide and not very deep in a lot of areas, and almost everybody had topics that we could have drilled into a lot more. So I at least liked it, but I'm a business owner like the rest of you, so we'll see what the audience says. But so to wrap it up and try to keep this, the quicker you make this, the more you have a chance to ask each other questions. So we'll start with Derek. Best part about owning your own interactive company and the worst part.
Yeah, so that's some pretty important questions, and I'll tell you what. I had an opportunity to talk to a new business owner, a young startup guy. And he was telling me about, how hard it was for him to go through a bunch of things and to raise money and keep the doors open. I said, you've got to savor that moment. You've got to feel it, and you've got to experience it, and you've got to really love that moment, because the harder you work, the more you're going to remember that. And it's fleeting moments like that where your company is down and out, and you've got to turn it around. So that's where you really get to test yourself. And some of the best moments is when I go to conferences. I have a strategy at conference. Of course, we have a booth, but sometimes I'll rent like a Audi R8 or a Maserati or a supercar, and I'll park it in front of the conference, and I'll ask the CEOs, I'll ask my clients, hey, do you guys want to go for a ride in a Audi R8? Do you want to go for a ride in a Maserati? And I'll have 10 minutes with that client to pitch them on an app. So I remember one time I was in San Diego, top down supercar. I took some clients for a ride, and I estimate that probably made me close to $500,000 taking those clients out for a ride. So the worst part is savoring those moments when you're down, and the best part is enjoying those moments when you're up.
I've now realized not having a driver's license was a terrible business mistake. You just made me realize. Dan.
So the best part of owning my company is that I do literally everything that I love for a living. And I get to do that with my partner, and I get to build a company that my daughters get to be a part of. So I have 3 young daughters in various ages, so ranging from 12 to 3 to 2 months old. And all of them get to be exposed to watching us start a business and run a business, and right now from home. So I get to have that sort of imprint on my daughters to show them that they can do anything, and they can be enabled to build all kinds of stuff, and they get to like meet the team and be part of it. And all of that is super rewarding. The worst part of owning a business is all of the, I guess, mental distress that comes with it through that process. And I've done talks about this in the past where it is, one, difficult to maintain friendships when you're focused entirely on keeping your business alive. And part of that is running your business into a pandemic. Like, we're all here, but who knew if we were going to be at this point, in March? And even then, our province isn't doing great right now. So, there's a lot of like mental aspects to that go into building a team, maintaining that team, maintaining the people on your team, maintaining friendships and your mental health while you're trying to do it. I recently tweeted that I could feel myself slipping back into a mentality where I was constantly working. And I think I tweeted that at like 2 a.m. or something like that. Like, it was late, and I had been working very late. And so I keep finding myself slipping into these states where it is all work all the time and no actual separation, because one, I do what I love, but it also is still work. And it becomes extremely difficult to separate, especially in a climate like right now. So.
Yeah, I like to think like this is like the second time I've been in this office, maybe the third time since the whole pandemic, right? It's now utilized to have a nice backdrop for these conferences. But I was saying the same things. Like, I didn't build my business thinking my kid was going to be home with me and I was going to be working like in this tight space, because it was never, I didn't buy my house to have a home office there, so that's definitely tough. Leslie.
Well, so the coolest part of, like, the best part of running a business is we're inventing the future. Like, we really are. There's very few companies doing what we're doing. There's no playbook. There's no like, where's VR going? Like, I don't know, we're doing it. So every once in a while you step back and you reflect on your journey as a company owner, and you're like, wow, we have done so many firsts. We have explored so many ideas. And that is something like my 11-year-old self just doesn't even recognize my 40-year-old self. And there's so many cool things about that. Like, there's a lot. I could go on a list, quite a few things. And I'm going to echo Dan on the worst part. I have to say that I wasn't prepared for the mental health kind of management required when you, like, in terms of like losing friends. And so like having good co-founders really does help a lot, because when one is falling, the other two are holding you up. And when the other is falling, the other two are holding you up. And you were always holding each other up. So that's kind of keeping us going. But I remember like completely losing an entire friend group because I just didn't have time. I just did not have time to go to that, like party they were having that one night, or I was traveling. Like, for the first few years, I must have I was so many places that you just lose your sense of like where you are, what's home. So there's this kind of this volatility that is an adventure, but you don't necessarily see the sacrifice when you're in it. And then when you kind of come out for a bit to take a breath, you're like, oh yeah, I should go connect with some of those people. And, you know, I haven't seen my mom in a while, and so these are some of the things that no one tells you. And now as we're starting to understand where we're going as a company, and we've really created systems to keep that mental health balance happening, it's becoming easier. But I would say if that was a naive perspective, because you don't really understand that until you're in the trenches and you're kind of crawling through it, and you're like, holy cow, this is an intense experience. But it is really fun. Like, those experiences end up being really cool too. So it's that balance.
Yeah, the amount of conversations I have with some other people in this panel, but which I'm not going to necessarily name, or other business owners, where it's like anxiety, or like can't sleep because of anxiety, or like the mental health thing, or like not having enough time. Like Mark said, you made that idle clicker because you didn't have time to play games. Like it is like a life change. It almost becomes a lifestyle, and none of us meant for it to become a lifestyle, to be a business owner, but it kind of became a lifestyle, whether you like it or not. And learning to deal with that, learning to deal with the stress is definite. I totally get it. Mark, best part, worst part?
So for me, I'd say the best part is definitely that there's always something new to learn every day. And I would classify myself, I guess, as like a puzzle solver. I suppose that would be my personality type if I have one. You know, if something doesn't work, something doesn't make sense, I need to figure it out. That's kind of where I'm happiest. And what I've realized over the years is that doesn't matter if that's something very boring, like trying to figure out my taxes or tax credits or legal paperwork or dealing with anything like that, right? Just realizing that I need to find a solution. There's nobody who's going to do it for me. You know, this is something that I can take on. This is something I can figure out and stuff. One, it's very empowering, and I kind of enjoy that feeling that you're like, hey, I figured that out. You know, when I know a lot of people in this position maybe couldn't, or maybe wouldn't, or you know, it's just something that I kind of got to the end of and figured out on my own. And kind of along those lines as well is just, you know, that's why I like development as well. That's why I like making games. I like looking at something, you know, opening up Unity, there's nothing there. And you know, a couple days later, I've got a prototype going and there is something there. Like, that kind of ties into the puzzle solving and stuff as well. So I kind of like that whole aspect of a business where it's like, sometimes you look back and go, how did I even get to this point? How is the business still surviving? I know a lot of businesses don't. You know, it's even something just to kind of get to the point where we're talking about this stuff like this. And so I think that's probably one of the best parts for me, is just the constant learning, feeling grateful that I'm here, that, you know, things have gone this way and that I've gotten to this point. It's a pretty cool feeling. And I think every day, especially, you know, others have touched on it, but during the pandemic, that's something that kind of, you know, I get up, I'm having my breakfast and I think about, like, I'm happy to be where I am with that. And I'm happy that this is the situation. I'm happy that I have a business that can keep going during this pandemic. You know, I know a lot of people aren't in that situation. As for the worst part, you know, there's, I would say that it's a lot of the unknowns for me. You know, it kind of sounds a little bit strange with what I just finished saying, but you know, something changes in mobile, like a year ago, Google kind of completely upended and changed their algorithms for how things work with their games. So, you know, we'd go from, I'd release something and getting, you know, a couple 100,000 downloads in a month without doing too much, to the equivalent this year, which is like, oh, you know, you get 1,000 for that same work. So you're constantly kind of pivoting there. And, you know, what worked 6 months ago, what worked a year ago, it doesn't work anymore. And so you're always trying to, you know, learn new things and surround yourself with people that kind of maybe have these answers. You realize sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. But I would say that, you know, especially being a small company of just 2 people, trying to do that constant figuring out now what, because, you know, the rug was pulled out from under me again. After enough times of it, you get a little less panicked each time, but there's still stress there where you're like, well, I've got some runway and I've got some money saved up, so I'll be okay. But you know, what worked really well suddenly doesn't work at all. And there's no reason, like, don't go looking for it, right? Google doesn't care. You know, they're not sitting there going, here's an explanation for why everything just completely went crazy for everyone. No, they're just like, we changed something, one of our computers changed something, and have fun. Like there's no real explanation. So I'd say that's probably one of the worst parts is just there's not a lot of safety net other than what you come up with on your own, and that can be scary sometimes.
I like that mix of gratitude, especially in view of the pandemic, because we are in an industry that is both. I don't want to say it's pandemic proof, but like we're not in the front lines. We can mostly work remote. We can deal with it, and we also happen in Canada have a government that seems to be relatively supportive or very supportive of our industry compared to other people who you just watch get just slaughtered, and you're just like, there's a capriciousness to the fact that like I fell into a thing that can survive, and other people get slaughtered for no reason, like it's not their fault. So we'll now go to Noah.
Yeah, this is tough, right? Because I mean, for both the best and the worst, from as a business owner on the business side, I think I'd just be echoing pretty much everything else that everyone else here has said. It's so familiar and it's so real. I mean, I think we share a lot of similar experiences that way. I guess all I could sort of add maybe is more on the sort of creative side and the video game side of being in a business where we're creating entertainment and like creating sort of new products. That for the best thing for me in that respect is that I have this chance, and our team has this chance to make something that is going to reach out to other people and capture their attention. And maybe it'll only be 2 people, or maybe it'll be 2 million people. Like we have the ability to do that, and that is incredibly exciting. We have the ability to make something that communicates an idea or grabs or elicits a reaction or a lot of reactions from others, from our players. And that is really the great part of it. That's, I think, what drives a lot of game developers anyways, to sort of get into this business, this crazy risky business. And then the negative side, of course, is that of that is we're also just creating entertainment. Like it doesn't necessarily inherently have any kind of like intrinsic value, and the challenge of it is often agonizing over if what we're creating is right. All of the challenges that Mark talked about in terms of like the puzzling out, the figuring out, the problem solving, which is so awesome to go through at the time. I mean, it's really exciting, but there's also that agony in a lot of cases of hitting walls and trying to figure out exactly how to solve these things, and sometimes having to go back, and that side of it too is just like incredibly frustrating on the negative. But business side, I agree 100% with everyone else. I think it's pretty common experience.
So I'm not great at math, but doing the math, 5 more questions, given how long it's taking to answer each of these questions, we probably can't do that, unfortunately.
Lightning round.
Oh my God. But what I was thinking is unfiltered, uncontextualized by me. If each of you could just take a moment or two to say whatever you want, not anything profane, but like mostly whatever you want about this business, your experience, giving people advice, whatever you want to do. You've all become successes in your own right, and this is a chance for you to just say what you would like to people who might want to be in your shoes or want to learn something from you. So I will go reverse order from last time, because that's the way my screen is, so I can remember it. Noah.
All right, I'm just going to be quick then. You got to be crazy if you want to do this thing. And if you're crazy enough and you got enough sort of persistence, you can find a path somehow. But you may fail, and it may be a setback, and you may take a lot of time to find your way back. But yeah, you got to be nuts. It's not a smart thing to do. Get a job.
Mark.
Yeah, I would say that definitely kind of echoing what Noah just said, but if you're going to do this, I mentioned it earlier too, just be prepared that whatever you're putting in, you may very well lose. And, so I mean that literally. Like if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to burn through $50,000 in savings and give this a shot, at the end of 6 months or a year or whatever time frame you've got, you may have $0. You may even be in the negative, because you didn't kind of plan for all the unforeseen things that come up. And really, all you have to show for it is your experiences. And if that's something that you're willing to take that risk on and you're willing to do that, then by all means go for it. But I think a lot of people don't think that way. I think there's a lot of, hey, if I throw some money at this and I put some time into this, like, how could I go wrong? And I'm certainly one that always tries to advocate for getting a lot of the failures out there more often. I love reading the postmortems and stuff from people in the industry that are like, this game failed and it failed hard. Like, we spent $2 million and we made $5. Like, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. And I wish that there was more of that was publicized more. It's certainly not the, very attractive thing that a lot of people want to read. A lot of people want to read the articles of like, I made $50 million. And it's like, well, cool. I want to make $50 million. So I think try to focus on, some of those failures and stuff. And I think in the last few years, that's becoming more and more common, that a lot of people are realizing that's maybe a good thing to look at. But yeah, I would definitely pay some attention there.
I think people are worried about never being given money again if they explain how they screwed up the money. But I do agree that that's like the real information. That's like hearing that somebody made Angry Birds and it went friggin' crazy. Now they're making movies. There's only so much you can learn from that, right? So I think that is huge, and it makes me, makes me think that I should talk more about my failures. But gotta tell you, I'm probably not going to until I'm a success, if I ever am. Then you're like shielded from it a little bit, Leslie.
I would say, first of all, okay, so when I decided I want to go all in this business, I called my brother up and I said, hey, my brother, hey, so I'm going to go all in on this business, and just in case, do you have a spot in your basement for me to live if I lose all my money? And I literally did that, and I got him to commit to a yes, and so I knew I had a place to live if this thing failed. So I checkboxed on that. The next thing is you don't know what you don't know. So expect to hit the wall a few times. It doesn't matter how excited you are and how well you think you're doing. Something will happen that you're not expecting. You're going to hit that wall. And my advice is don't beat yourself up for the failure, because it's part of the growth. And the longer you beat yourself up, the slower you're going to take to get off the ground and start again. Because really, it's just part of the process. Because every time you hit that wall, you get up and you go, oh, there's an entire area of business knowledge that I didn't understand, that I was just being naive about. So that's part of it. So be prepared to fall and get up, and know your risk, know yourself. Can you, that's why I called my brother. I knew myself. There was a chance this wasn't going to happen. So that's the crazy advice I'd say.
And as we had said earlier, we have everyone in this panel have failed repeatedly. So, definitely you got to be accustomed and ready for that. Dan.
I'd like to try and tally up the cost of all of our failures combined, because it would be mind-boggling. I'm not going to talk much about failure here. If anyone ever wants to talk about failure, you can ping me directly. But I kind of have two important things to consider. One, if you're going to go down this road, make sure that it is something you truly believe in. Like you don't go down this road with half a heart in, and you're, maybe going to just jump back into this other company at some point. Like, you are going to be successful based off of the amount of yourself you put in. And I think that like a lot of places fail because they aren't mentally or in spirit all in on their own ideas and their own driving force. The other more important piece is that we've said this a few times as a group, you shouldn't try to do it completely alone. Not to say that you can't be a sole founder, but to surround yourself with other people who are in that mentality and are trying to do similar things. So mentorship is huge. Find a mentor, network, meet other business owners so that you can learn from other people. I love telling people that Noah was officially my mentor, and I fired 3 mentors before Noah was my mentor. That's one of my favorite stories. So
It's one of my
reaching
favorite
out to perfect. So it really boils down to, are you willing to go all in, both in your heart and in your wallets? And also, are you willing to put yourself out there to tell people when you need help? Because if you are just going to try and internalize that, you're not going to recover from your failures in the same way as you will from learning from your peers.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I sort of, you made me think about when you're saying that, is there's the, you got to love it when you do it, and you got to really be a passion for it. You got to really want to do it. But the hard thing, and this is just like relationships with people, you know, and I think when you're in the business long enough, maybe this doesn't happen to everybody, but it does sometimes happen to me. You start to not know if you do love it anymore, but you're here, and this is how you pay for all of your things, you know? And like, I go back and forth. I'm more like, whenever I get close to the end of a game, I stop liking it because the fun part's at the beginning. So for me, it's like cyclical, but you know, that's hard. That you got to challenge yourself to get back in sometimes, or really make those tough calls. But that is super, like, you're right, it is essential. If you're not on board with it,
you have to love it when it sucks.
You gotta love it when it sucks, and you gotta be, it's the love that lets you bear the terribleness. All right, last but definitely not least, Derek.
Yeah, so appreciate it. And Dan, I would love to tally up my mistakes, because I'll tell you what, that's something else. And I really don't ponder and look back at that. I have a couple pieces of advice, both professionally and personally. Success and business is, and I've heard, you know, people like Warren Buffett give you all kinds of success, but it's 5% new idea and 95% execution, right? So the better you can execute, the better you can sell. And also, Les touched on this. If the product is good, the market is good. So those are 2 pieces of professional advice. Now, personally, from my perspective, you got to define what is success to you. You know, before you start writing anything, you know, set a goal and say, you know, this is what I want. I want my app to have 1 million downloads. I want to make $1 million. I want to be, you know, looked upon by my peers in high regard. Now that's success. But the most important piece is something that's personal. We look back on it, we say, you know, I can't stand this. I hate doing this. You know, I just want to sleep. I got to get to work tomorrow, all these things. But in a personal life, you've got to find a good partner. You got to find a good business partner, and you've got to find a good life partner. You know what I mean? Like, if your wife isn't supporting you, she could be telling you the worst things. That's going to make the biggest impression on your life. So starting a business, Corey, with your wife, or Dan, starting a business and having your family see that, that's such an important piece. And it's something that's overlooked, you know, by just personal people having relationships, is that you're going to go home to that person and they've got to support you. You know what I mean? You've got to be a success in their eyes. You be a success in your eyes. And it takes a lot of the mental relief away from that. Fortunately, you know, I've had a lot of support, and I've been pointed in the right direction by my mentors as well.
I'm going to send that to my wife.
It's another form of luck, you know. It's hard to know who you end up with in life. And I certainly know early on too, like, I was literally like unemployed for a while, and she was supporting me when I got my first big break, right? And it's like, that might not have happened to a lot of other people, you know. I want to thank you guys all so very much. I at least thought that this was a hell of a time. It was almost like, you know, war stories with the guys, you know, with other peers who were in the industry. And I learned a lot, and I thought it was great, at least. So hopefully we can do this again sometime. Yeah, it was an immense pleasure and privilege to be able to ask you guys all those questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Good. And you know what? I want to just say that I want to give a shout out to Dan Both. He's the person behind the scenes on the podcast, and he's been making this look great, and all the prep time he's putting towards it. And I talked to Dan. I said, you know, Dan, it looks like it's so simple. And that's the beauty of it. So I appreciate it. And I know I speak for the entire panel. Thank you, Dan Both.
Yeah, it's definitely requires a lot of effort for him to pull this off every time we do this. So I appreciate you saving me there and making sure that Dan got the praise he deserves. Thank you. Ciao.